Well, welcome to the Missions Book Podcast, where we talk with authors about important mission books. And today I'm very excited because we are announcing the launch of a new imprint called Mission Kids. And we've recognized that there's a lack of important material out there for kids related to missions. And so we're launching a new series of books that are designed for young readers to nurture a passion for the peoples of the world and inspire them to participate in God's global mission. And the first book in that series is written by Justine Taylor, who's with us today. So Justine Taylor is the Children's Ministry Director at Hillsdale Baptist Church in Regina, Saskatchewan. And she's the author of the forthcoming book called God's Child, a true story of brave faith in Ethiopia. And it's geared for children ages 8 through 12. So Justine, thanks for joining me today. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I live on the Canadian prairies. I live on a family farm just outside of our big capital city in Saskatchewan. And I work at a church doing children's ministry. And I have 3 kids. I've been married for 20 years. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Great. So the book is focused on a boy named Ngusi who has a broken back and a crooked smile, or was it a crooked smile and
a big smile and a crooked back? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what led you to writing about this little boy in God's Child?
Yeah, so it was a series of events. We were needing a new series to teach in our weeknight kids club at church, and we wanted something missions focused. We were replacing one that was fairly outdated, and my colleague Chris Daniluk had read Kay Bascom's book, Hidden Triumph in Ethiopia, about Ngusi, and also some of the main characters in that story, John Coleman, goes to our church. And so she had said, what about this story? Could we adapt this for children? I think the kids would like it. And so things unfolded, and I did a deep dive into Kay's book, and then the Colemans were able to provide me with so many resources, and I thought, yes, kids are going to love this story. It's so unique and exciting and encouraging.
Yeah, that's great. So God's Child is rooted in a specific moment in Ethiopia. How did you approach telling that story faithfully, and what did the research look like?
Yeah, so that was a tricky thing because I'm dealing with real life people. And yet this historical moment in Ethiopia is not very well documented in history books, or the history books that I would try to track down were out of print. And to be honest, I had some vague knowledge of the famines in Ethiopia in the 80s, but I didn't really know the whole context of the communist revolution and the Red Terror. So I had to do a lot of reading, and luckily for me, Murray Coleman had quite a collection of books, and also luckily for me, the missionaries who were there during that time did a really good job documenting it. People like Kay Bascom, people like John Cumbers, and they wrote books and accounts. We have other missionaries at our church who served in Ethiopia at that time, so they had resources. But it was nice too, like Murray had a book in his collection that was actually written by one of the communist officials of the government, and he had fled to the United States later. And so to hear a secular perspective, to see what it was like. So it took a lot of historical reading. But then on top of that, Coleman, who's in the story, she did a really wonderful job of documenting things. She had everything typed out on her typewriter. She had photographs of Ngusi and different places and things in the book, and that was very helpful to me. And then the final thing was John had kept all of Ngusi's letters, and that was like holding treasure in my hands, these fragile little papers that have flown across the ocean, and that to me was so important to get a real sense of Ngusi's heart, because honestly, that's where the title God's Child came from, was as I read this, even as he was an adult and married and had gone through so many hard things that would really cause a lot of people to become bitter and closed down, his heart was still so joyful, and his spirit was still so um, thankful for salvation. And I thought, you know what, he just has that faith of a child that Jesus calls us to. And he was such a good example of that he starts out, turning to God as a child, but he stayed God's child through the duration of his life. So those letters, again, were just such important artifacts, I guess, in my research. And so putting all of these sources together to give me kind of the big picture of this insane time in history that I knew pretty much nothing about to begin with.
Yeah, that's one thing that really stuck out when I read your book was like I myself have very little I've had very little exposure to the history of Ethiopia and what's gone on there, and it comes through so beautifully in your book in a way that young readers can connect with and not feel like, oh, this is a history lesson, but it's done very naturally,
Yeah,
and I
I
really
did
appreciate
laugh
that.
that kids would be going home and telling their parents the story, and yeah, about the communist revolution in Ethiopia, and parents are going, there was a communist revolution in Ethiopia, so yeah, I did try to make it so that kids would just feel like they could understand a lot of important historical, political kind of turmoil that was happening in a way that would make sense to them.
Hmm. So God's Child does deal with some heavy themes like communism, the revolution, and Ngozi faces persecution and imprisonment. How do you recommend that teachers and parents deal with these themes with their kids as they're reading God's Child?
Yeah, I think as a teacher, and a parent, I take the approach that sometimes childhood is the best time to introduce hard topics, because then we're setting the stage, we're planting the seeds of truth that those kids need to build their lives on, so that when they do face these things down the road, they're equipped, right? And there's something about a child that can just receive this information at face value and go, okay, and it is not laden down with so many other common connotations or worries or things like that. So that's one thing, is that even when we deal with scripture, when we're teaching Bible stories to kids, there's heavy stuff in there. Even the gospel, we say to tell the good news, you have to tell the bad news, right? And kids need that. And I think back to like C.S. Lewis made the comment, he's like, kids are going to face cruel people, cruel circumstances. So let them hear of heroic people, so that they can feel like they can face those things, just like someone that they saw the example of also face those things. That's a very loose paraphrase, obviously. But yeah, so that's kind of my approach, that kids are able to handle hard things. But yes, you need to do it with gentleness. Like I said, I did this deep dive into what was behind this revolution, who was fueling it, what were the ramifications. And I'm going to take all of this, which is much too heavy for children, and I'm going to boil it down to just the essence and just the facts of it. I'm not going to get into gory details that need not be there, right? Even Ngozi's torture, Kay does a good job of explaining more clearly what happened to him in her book for adults. But for us, we're gonna keep it simple. Just know that he was really hurt. The kids need to feel that empathy and that sadness over it, but they don't need to know every detail. So we're taking it and we're saying, here's what you can handle. But at the same time, as we're giving them that, we're also giving them the teaching and the truth and the guidance to say, but Ngozi could have hope even when he was facing that pain, because Jesus faced pain for him, and he trusted God in those circumstances. So when we're giving them the hope and the truth along with that, that kids can hold on to that, then we're actually equipping them and making them stronger and better prepared for things that they will face down the road. And I think back to, being maybe 11 years old and reading The Hiding Place and the story of Corrie Ten Boom, and how much that challenged my young heart to say, could I do it? Could I be brave? Could I have the courage and the faith that I need to face that? And I feel like that was really good preparation for me down the road to be able to stand up for what's right and stand up for people who are, being harmed, and to tell the truth no matter the cost, right? So yeah, I feel like these stories are important for children, but yeah, it takes a level of gracious, gentle guidance through those topics.
Yeah, that's really great. I think a lot of Christian parents are recognizing now that they need to talk with their kids about like grief and death and difficult topics rather than shelter them until they turn 18 or something and let them
Yeah,
out.
and that's one of the major advantages I had in writing this is I wrote it first for the kids at our church and then handed it off to William Carey Publishing to make into a novel, which meant that even my narrator voice in the book, I thought, oh, I'm not there with the kids. Sometimes when you're telling a story to children, your demeanor can even help them feel comforted and you can answer their questions in the moment, right? Whereas as if you're handing a page to a child, I can't do that with them. So trying to make sure the narrator voice was talking to the child a little bit more intimately, a little bit more saying, hello, reader, this is what's happening, right? But I would also say my advantage of teaching to the children in our church is that I've seen kids are already dealing with hard things. Our world is in turmoil, right? And kids live through a pandemic. We have a very international church. We've got kids coming from communist China or Nigeria where there's persecution, or Russia. We've got those kids here in our church who know that the world is in turmoil. We've got children in the last year who've lost younger sisters or a father to cancer, right? And so kids, they have this grief already. So if we can give them stories where they can step back, and it's not their story, but those stories can teach them how to deal with their story, I think that's a really valuable tool for families and churches and children.
Yeah, that's great. So, how do you hope that God's child will shape the way young readers think about courage, faith, and God's love?
Yeah, one of the things I love about Neguse is he was not some up there, out of touch kind of person. He was a very humble man from very humble background. And he was just faithful, right? And I think that's important for kids to hear. We live in a society that is constantly telling you you need followers and likes and prestige and influence and all these things, and you should have a job that pays this much, and a life that looks like this. And I think we as a church can give kids a lot more hope by saying you can do what God has called you to do. And that was a determination Neguse made early on, and he faced a lot of setbacks to that, but he said wherever he goes, he's going to be a light for the Lord. And I think that is freeing for kids to hear that God made you for a specific purpose, and you don't need to chase all these other things. You just need to be faithful in what God gave you to do. So I hope that's an encouragement for children to see that no matter what they go through, and maybe not, a book will never be written about them, right? And even I think it's unique that Kay wrote this book about Neguse. There were many people who did amazing things, but that kids can just see a steady, humble faith is what is required of them, and the Lord knows that, right? And I think too, yeah, that sense of courage and hope from his story that he did it. Sometimes we just need to know somebody else has done it. I can do that too, right? And even just Neguse's modeling of Jesus did it, so he could do it, right? And I think that's a wonderful, hopeful thing for all of us to know that here I am facing this grief. Well, my Lord was well acquainted with grief. He knows. He's walked this road before me, and I can continue on as well. So I hope that it's, as much as it deals with hard topics, I hope it's a book full of hope for kids.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Justine, for sharing about God's child. I'm really excited to see how readers will respond to it.
Yeah, thanks.
As an adult, I've really benefited from the book and appreciate it. So I'm sure that both parents and kids will both enjoy and learn a lot from it. So
Yeah, thank you.
thank you so much.
Yeah.